forever um, I'm forever grateful to you, Naina, for always stepping in. And I know that you're going to do this topic absolute justice. So thank you so much for speaking again today. And to the students, enjoy. And I'll be in touch soon. Thanks, Naina.
I'll be sending you my bill soon.
I'll buy you lunch.
Yeah. Oh. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope we're going to have a lovely session and discussion about reading text. So let me just put on the share screen. Let's see. Okay, let me just get rid of that, get rid of my, what is that? Okay, doesn't really matter. So I think I'm talking to a group of students, if I heard Colleen correctly. And of course, you are all aware that reading for a PhD and a master's is the most important function of that journey towards your qualification. And in most parts of the world, it's called reading for an M or reading for a PhD. And there's a reason for that. And so everything is around readings. So today we're going to look at how to read academic text. I think my topic is slightly different to the one that Colleen sent to me. I'm not exactly sure, but I think it leads to the same outcome. So just to give you an idea, an academic text is a reading material that provides information which include concepts and theories that are related to the specific discipline. And I think you all are quite au fait with that. Now, why do we read academic texts as part of our study? One of them is to get to know what is the state of knowledge regarding the problem that we're trying to investigate, regarding what we know, what are the explanations, what theories have been used, and so on. A second is to get to grips with how did they come to know what they know? They've found these findings, how did they come to it? What are the methodologies and methods that were used? What are some of the explanatory terms or theories that explain what was found? And finally, and there's more of this, but just in a nutshell, we read because we want to know whether our investigation is worth undertaking. If it has been done countless times already, what would be the point of doing it unless contextually it's different? So our context throws up variables that the original studies or other studies did not have to contend with. And do these variables shape and influence understanding of the findings, understanding of theories in action, and the understanding of a concept, or whether the concept needs to be widened or broadened? So those are the things that we undertake the reading. But an important part of being a student is to develop a systematic way of reading the text. How do you make sense of it, and so on? So let's see if I can offer you some concrete things that you can do to get to grips. I just want to state at this point that if you have any, what you call it, what I want to say is, yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Just put your hand up. I think somebody can just alert me, or just unmute and push yourself into the conversation. This is not a conversation, it's more like a soliloquy because I'll be doing all the talking. So please, let's turn it into a conversation with you interjecting and offering your inputs. So the first thing that I normally do when I pick up an article And I've picked it up because of a particular focus, which has been indicated to me by the title of that reading and the key words that are there. So amongst that host of 4,000, 6,000, 8,000 words, which is represented here by the black leaves, can you identify the red one that is the most important one that is driving this entire article or book and so on? So what you are looking at, has the author made the focus clear? So the focus could be the problem statement or the investigation itself, because it tells you, so you know what you are looking for. So one of the things that when you're reading this, the first thing you're going to ask yourself, is this focus necessary and is it relevant? Because that's a way that you can critique the writer by saying this is an age-old problem in which multiple solutions have been provided, and the only thing that the author tweaks is blah, blah, blah. So that you enter the conversation immediately. Okay? Or you can say that this is a necessary focus which needs to be extended and taken further. So it's just to give you that idea. So you identify, it's very important to identify the focus and the key terms of an article. And I would suggest that you make notes. And I like to handwrite certain notes. I normally have a book for a chapter that I'm writing. And if it were even during my thesis, I had a book, and I would often just write down the author and the title, making sure that on the computer I've captured the full reference, and then write, because somehow for me, this is how it works. When I write, my brain gets activated and it helps me to understand, to put things in place and so on. But if you have another system, if you're more afraid with modern technologies and so on, please feel free, but take some notes in some form or the other. So the next thing that we look at, and this is the one that I go to immediately, is the structure of the article. And I like the Toulmin model. I think it really helps me to construct an argument for each paragraph and for the article or chapter on a whole. But it also helps me to disentangle how the author is writing. So we looking at the structure of the article. So the first thing is that the author writes with a conclusion that they are seeking to establish. And sorry, can I just break for 1 minute? I just need to attend to something. I'll be back in a moment. I'm so sorry about that. So the structure of an argument is that a claim is being made, and the entire article is written in order to provide some kind of evidentiary backing for this claim. And then the warrant is the principal chain of reasoning. So what are the reasonings that are developed in order to make this claim, and on what is it grounded? That means what kinds of facts or evidence or data and so on. Let's look at the next one, which kind of expands the Toulmin model in in much more detail. So they've given an example that your neighbor Tom has 2 large German shepherds packing. So maybe in a way that's also context. And the warrant, dogs are animals that bark and howl. We know that's what they do. So what are the grounds on which you are saying that your neighbor dogs are involved? You hear barking and howling in the distance. And the qualifier, so the chances are, that means you're coming to make a claim, there are dogs nearby. So, but what would be a rebuttal argument? And this is what you always have to be aware of when you are making your own argument. Unless there are wolves or coyotes nearby, which means that this argument falls apart. Now, when you are reading an article or any academic text, can you find a rebuttal that challenges the claim, the qualifier, the grounds on which this argument is built? That's what you are doing in your reading. Because we have a tendency to kind of just without challenging, just accept that which is printed and published as if that is authentic, unchallenged knowledge, and we just have to accept it. But always look for the rebuttal. And I can tell you that South Africa in particular, and Africa as a whole, and maybe even the third world, we always have grounds for rebuttal. Our contexts are very complex. They are very unequal. They are often multi-faith, multilingual, multi-race, and all of those kinds of things. So claims that are made in other parts of the world, especially in democratic settings or in homogeneous settings like Japan and China and so on, can be rebutted from our context. So look for where you can insert yourself to say, because that's where you demonstrate your understanding of knowledge building, but more important is that you are engaging with the text critically. And when you do the rebuttal, you don't say I. You could say something like, however, when placed in a different context, then we're beginning to hear what is called your voice, the way you are thinking and so on. So remember, when you are reading, that's what you are doing. You're looking for things that you agree with the author. You're also looking for things that can be challenged. Okay. Any questions or anything, please just put up your hand. So another point about reading a text is searching for evidence. Is the author making claims with or without evidence? Simple. The earth is flat. We want evidence. Of course, there's plenty of evidence. You could say the ground that you're standing on is flat. But that can be countered by images from space and all of that, which shows the curved nature of the planet and so on. And stuff like this. How do we know it's not empty? So this is where methods and methodologies come into play. When we look at the evidence, how did they come to know? Did they break into the safe? Did they, and they couldn't do that? Or did they have the code in which to open it and get to the inside? So we need some kind of evidence that tells us on what basis a claim is made. So when you're reading, does the author provide evidence that is believable? Evidence that is indisputable. And that's what we mean by evidence. It must be indisputable. or at least there must be space for an alternative form of evidence to be accepted. All right, so now we've looked at focus, we're looking at argument, and we're looking at evidence. Now, what are the forms of evidence that one would search for? Evidence like, is there empirical evidence? That means, has a study been conducted? Do we have stats and figures and numbers and percentages and so on? Do we have evidence from interviews and surveys? Or do we have evidence from what others have written? That means other scholarly texts. So it's very hard to use a newspaper as evidence, because we don't know how that evidence was generated, whether it's somebody's opinion or an attitude or just made up or some belief or whatever. Of course, you can use that evidence in a different way. And does the author actually use it in a different way? So the author makes a point and then says recent publications, like the daily newspapers and on television news broadcasts and so on. Many of these examples have been discussed and so on. But that would not constitute what I would say is primary evidence. Okay, so look at the evidence and ask yourself whether that evidence is acceptable or not. If it's not, it's another entry into providing some kind of critique. Remember, when you are asked to review an article and so on, these are the kinds of things that you would be looking at. Okay. You're reading the article, and as this little picture shows, is it a 6 or is it a 9? And it's really hard to decide just by looking at that, which one we go with. And so now we come to the idea of who or which point of view is at play. And often these are the kinds of big views. Is it a psychological perspective? Is it an economic perspective? Is it a socio-cultural perspective? Because that also will give you to say that it's a very short-sighted way of setting up an argument, because this psychological view can be challenged from indigenous understandings of the way humans feel or have emotions and so on. So the point of view, identify the author's sort of lens through which the person is writing. And then you can agree with it and say, within the context of the article, it makes sense. But when related to the kind of study that you want to do, then certain variables have to be factored in. So remember, when you're reading an article, you're never just reading it for the sake of reading it. It's not like picking up a novel and reading it. Now you really have to get into the shoes of the author, into the head of the author. But simultaneously, you have to constantly step out of those shoes. You have to constantly step out of the author's mind and engage with your own. So it's quite a double whammy that one has to deal with when working with literature and academic texts. Okay. So is the author engaging in stereotyping or biasness? And one can read between the lines, above the lines, or below the lines. So is there some stereotyping of the context of the respondents kind of taking place? Okay, so, and perhaps this also comes to point of view, you know, you have the identical data with just one added aspect to it, the glasses, which brings about an idea that people who wear glasses are more respectable, they're more authentic, they're more intelligent, and so on. And often you can suss this out in the way an author writes, the kinds of words that they choose, and so on, which will kind of hint at stereotyping and biasness. And often this kind of stereotyping and biasness that authors, I wouldn't like to say they're guilty of, but perhaps they default to, is because a lot of it is unconscious. But that doesn't mean that we have to accept it. So the thing about us as readers is, how do we read with consciousness? So you have to be super conscious of the things that you are reading and try to pick up the bias and the stereotyping or any other kind of, biasness, I think, for want of a better word, that you can pick up. I am still not getting any questions, comments in between, so on. Please feel free. Okay, so let us look at the assumptions that an author makes. And usually these are not so apparent, but you can in some way. So let us look at, for example, the assumptions underlying a curriculum. So one of the things about the curriculum that is chosen, whether it's in education or medicine or engineering or whatever, is that whatever we've chosen is something that can be learned, that it's worthy of study, that it's composed of the most important things a person should know about that field, that as a result of the study and mastery, human lives will improve, that as a result of its study and mastery, culture and society will experience improvement, evolution, and growth, that it works well with everything else. Now, that is the underlying assumptions that one makes of a curriculum. Can you identify what are the underlying assumptions of the argument that an author is making? So, for example, if they are touting a particular drug and its efficacy, what is the underlying assumption thereof? That it's good for the body, that it will work, that it will cure a disease, that anyone with this particular disease should be able to take this drug, and so on and so on. And when you identify the assumptions, you can ask yourself, are these assumptions valid for this particular study? Okay. Because when we look at the curriculum, there are some things that are not learnable. So, and we refer to that as tacit knowledge. The explicit knowledge, which is the top of the iceberg that everyone can see and know, that is clear as crystal. But there are things below the waterline that comes with experience, with practice. Experts do certain things and not even aware that they're doing it. And so that might not be learnable through the curriculum. It might come later through practice and so on. So it's a way, again, of getting into the conversation, arguing with the author about the kinds of assumptions they are making of the phenomenon that is in that particular academic text. Okay. I hope that is clear. Okay. So, assuming beliefs, we often assume that everyone believes what we believe, and authors sometimes write in that way. And I think this captures it very well, especially when you are working with your participants, or your respondents, and so on. or we could be asking certain questions. And so that's where you start looking at what was the design like of the study, the questionnaire, and so on. Did it actually assume certain things in the way the questions were posed? Did they kind of hint towards an answer that the author was looking for? So, so look at that, the beliefs about the methods and the methodologies and the kinds of claims that are being made based on the methods and the methodologies. You know, I so much wanted to read some texts, but they were all so embedded in education. I just decided that maybe it doesn't serve the purpose for today. Okay. So what is taken for granted? What is the author taking for granted? And often when we read texts from other parts, especially the Western world, they kind of assume that we all have the same values, that we all have the same needs, that we all can do. And it often comes across when, in terms of, we want to save the world. We want to save women and children, you know, we can cure and so on. So they assume, they presume, or they suppose, or they surmise, or they conclude that this is the way things should be done. So what is it? And this is closely related to, again, assumptions and points of view. But there are something. So, for example, when textbooks are written for universities or even schools and so on, what is taken for granted is that the learning conditions for students anywhere in the world are the same. So examples might be culturally inappropriate, but it's taken for granted that we are all the same. But our political systems, our social conditions, our cultural beliefs, all of that makes it very different, not just from country to country, but from place to place, from home to home, and from one child to another in the same family. So when we take it for granted that this pertains to all of us, that is what you start looking at in order to either agree that, sure, we can take it for granted. So I think a sort of in the medical world, there's a lot that is taken for granted, which is accepted to all medical scientists. You know, so the function of a heart, for example, and so on. But in the social sciences, what is taken for granted can sometimes lead to quite dubious conclusions being reached and so on. And I know that in the hard sciences, in the medical sciences and so on, there is a move towards mixed methodologies, and that is inserting some qualitative measures to investigations and so on. So it might be useful just to be aware around the kinds of what is taken for granted about how similar or dissimilar we all are. Okay. Let's go to the next one. Generalization. So is there an overgeneralization that is made by the author? And so a generalization is generally a broad statement based on information, observations, or experiences. And the words that are often used are like some, really, many, few, typically. So there's a hesitancy to say it's everyone. But watch out for words that can lead to invalid generalizations when they say all or always or never or everyone, everybody, nobody, you know, so those are really very strong descriptors. So look out for these differences, because the often and sometimes and rarely and so on, it's not about lack of confidence, but it is about a sensitivity that I might just be wrong when it comes to every single case. Okay, so look for the kind of ways in which generalizations are communicated. Okay. And then we can look at whether the author is making a moralistic and judgmental assessments. So to give you an idea what a moral statement is, let's look at what a descriptive statement is. It gives an account of how the world is without saying it's good or bad. So it's kind of just describing the situation, keeping it as factual as possible without adding adjectives or adverbs. Okay. Then normative statements expresses an evaluation saying that something is good or bad, better or worse, relative to some standard or alternative. So normative statements, normally you can place them against some criteria, because if you give a group of people, they might come to the same conclusion based on the criteria that are there. But a moral statement is a claim that something is morally good or bad, right or wrong, or has some other moral quality. So here it's almost like you are a priest or God telling us what is acceptable morally or what is not accepted morally. And I think the early papers around AIDS and all of those kinds of things, where moral judgments were made about people's behavior and lifestyle choices, those were kind of moral statements, rather than the treatment, which are much more descriptive and normative in nature. So please keep in mind, all moral statements are normative statements, but not all normative statements are moral statements. So just keep in mind. So you could look at whether the author is taking the higher ground and kind of finding fault with everyone. And there are lots of studies that have very, what could I say, disparaging descriptions of the third world, of poverty, and so on, rather than describing the situation as it is, but almost kind of naming, blaming, and shaming in the way that it's written and so on. Right? And you can identify what we call a moral argument that includes at least one moral statement. Now, I don't know about you, but I can tell you that in the students, those students that I supervise, even in the review of the literature, it will have things like, so they review an article about teachers that are working too much, they have too much to do, and so on. And then in the next statement, instead of engaging with the argument and the article, they'll go and say, well, the department must make sure that teachers are not overworked. So maybe it's not a moral judgment. Maybe it's something they read in the article, but the way it's written, it gets captured as if they're moralizing. Instead of saying recent research has shown that teachers require far more support from the Department of Education. However, the kind of support is not stated explicitly or something. So it's about also how the author writes it. Can you identify it? And I have to tell you that if you can identify all of these, then it will also help you to how can I say, to avoid those mistakes when you are drawing up your own arguments. And I think that's the end of this presentation. And now I'd like to open for some discussion. I saw there was a comment in the chat. Yes, I will send the PowerPoint. I don't know how useful it is. It's largely made up of pictures, but I do believe it does have some self-explanatory aspects to it. So you are more than welcome to the PowerPoint. Yes, Elliot. Just unmute and go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much about such a very interesting presentation. I just want to comment about the evidence, especially when you are raising an argument, and especially when you are reading an article. I think sometimes if an author may make a mistake, especially if the author is writing about a culture that he or she does not belong in. What I have discovered when reading one of the articles was that an author was using a word which does not belong to that specific race or that ethnic group. and this was a derogatory word, which was very sensitive, and it was the word that did not differentiate between the good and the bad. So it clustered everything together. For example, the author used the word muti. The word muti, it's M-U-T-I. This word does not appear even in the Nguni languages. This concept or this term. And when I look into the English dictionary, I find that it means that it includes both medicines used by healers to heal people and dangerous medicines used by witches to harm or injure or kill people, as well as it also includes the use of body parts, and it's just called muti. And so I had to argue, saying that according to the Zulu Zulu grammar, we do not find such a word as muti, because the word T, which is THI, it stands for a tree. THI. It's T, it means a tree. So, and then we know that there are poisonous trees as well as trees that we can use for healing people. And then in our language, you differentiate between the poisonous and the good trees that you can use for healing purposes. So the prefix umu, and then you say T, which is a tree. It means it's a tree that is for healing purposes. So we call that umu T. And then when we refer to a tree that is poisonous, it's THIT, which means a tree, and then the prefix is ubu T. So there is a difference there. Umu T, it's something that you drink in order to recover from whatever illness you have. And then ubu T, it's a poisonous tree. So this word muti, and it is the word that I don't know who invented this word. It doesn't appear in our Zulu or Nguni vocabulary. So it's very dangerous, and it stigmatizes African traditional medicine because it says whatever they use for healing people purposes, they include tissues of dead people, they include,
So what's the point that you're
by
making?
its own, it just tarnish. The point that I'm making is that it's important to read with, to be vigilant when you are reading, to read and try and understand what the author is saying, and even the concepts that are being used by the author, not to simply accept whatever is written, even if you realize that this is not right, but you simply accept. But in this case, yeah, that is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay.
That
So
really and then you use literature as evidence to demonstrate that this word like muti, it doesn't exist, but what really exists, which is accepted in our culture, in our in Nguni language is, and then you explain according to literature on grammar, grammatical literature, we explain. And then that is what I'm saying.
So we got the point.
That you, as you have said that.
Yeah. So I think what it's very important, especially we're going into an era where we are decolonizing the knowledge and so on. But one also, so from another perspective, firstly, I would say you have to look at the intention of the author. Was the author's intention evil or bad? Or is it from a poor understanding? So remember now, for example, in everyday language, people have been using the word muti. It's in recent years that African linguists are making us aware. So it's like, before we used to say, the spelling of the names of roads like Mgeni, and now we know it's Mgeni without the U and so on. So we are being educated, and that is, as you talk about, the vigilance. So it is to write what is called a rebuttal. What you have brought out is the rebuttal to that. To say that in English, there might be words that have these multiple kind of meanings. But in this particular language, and if you look at its roots and so on, it doesn't have that, because we have two separate words for that, exactly as you explained. And I think what you are referring to is exactly what we should do to texts. We must challenge it. You know, we can't just accept it and let it continue as knowledge. Because once this person has written it, it will masquerade as authentic knowledge. Your response, I would say, not just for you then, Elliot, is to write a paper that challenges it. Right?
Yes.
So you've read it and you've understood and you've identified the foundation is faulty. The argument is built on a false idea that the Zulu language operates in the way that Derrida spoke about English, you know, in which we have the poison and the cure within one. And you are saying, no, we have a way to disentangle that. So yeah, I would fully agree with you that you do have the evidence because you can show where it comes from. But there's another understanding, and I don't know how valid that argument is, but I'm just putting it out, that language is dynamic and it undergoes changes and so on. And so we also have the battle between the traditionalists and the change agents, because language also undergoes. If you look at language, what we are seeing on Twitter, on WhatsApp, and so on, is a return to Egyptian hieroglyphics, right? Where pictures are replacing words. We're seeing dynamism in language. Remember, the original sentences were written, no full stops, no commas, and so on. So language has undergone a lot of changes. And there is more developments, especially when artificial intelligence takes over language and communication. So just keep that in mind. But thank you so much for sharing that. Luther, you have something to say? Elliot, if you want to say something, we'll come back to you. I'll just give Luther an opportunity. Luther's disappeared. No, he's here.
No, hi. I was
Hi.
trying to unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you so much for the presentation. I might have missed it. I apologize for that.
No problem.
I just wanted to find out if we are going to get a recording from this lovely presentation.
I'm sure Pumzile will definitely be sending it to all of you with the PowerPoint. No, definitely you'll get it. Yeah?
Okay, I'd really appreciate that. Thank you so much once again.
Okay, Elliot, you want to come back on and say something more?
Yes, what I want to say is that the author did not have bad intentions.
Okay.
I really enjoyed his argument, whatever he was saying, but the problem was this word. And what even made matters worse is that it is also found in the dictionary where it describes muti as the ingredients of muti, as I've just mentioned. That
Can I ask you a question, Elliot?
Yes.
Can I ask you a question? So when you looked at the dictionary meaning, did they tell you what the origins are? Because dictionaries will normally tell you it's Greek or Roman or Latin or something, right? Does this dictionary, is it possible that they've got this word from another part of Africa?
It's Oxford Dictionary.
No, but you know where the word is entered. Next to the word, they normally will tell you the origins of the word, that it's Greek or Roman. Or check on that and see, because if they say Zulu, then you know now that you can challenge. But if I were you, what I would do is I would educate this author. I would write to the author and tell him, exactly the explanation that you gave us. So this is something else. You'll be surprised how authors enjoy it when readers communicate with them. If you do find an email address, I mean, people have written to me from parts of the world. I won't forget this one person from Poland asked me because I can't upload that article because of the contract with the publisher. You know, because I signed the contract to say that we will not circulate this article. People have to buy the books. But they sent us an electronic copy, although it's written copyright, or example, or whatever it is, right across as a watermark through the book. I sent it, the whole book, to the author, because now I can't even take out just my chapter. The author wrote back to me and said, thank you. This is the way we do our capitalistic fight. And so we had a little discussion about how the knowledge we produce, we give it free, and then others are making money out of it. So I would say, Elliot, write to this author who might not be aware of the different dimensions of understanding. Because I just want to say,
Thank you so much.
Words capture reality. And that's what you are challenging. That sorry, I just need to drink some water. I'm walking around the house. The reality is incorrect. Because as you speak to anybody who knows the language, they will dispute it. So there we have it. That's such a powerful way that you explained about dealing with literature. And remember, the bigger the name, the more readership they garner, which means many more people are miseducated. There's just one thing that I think I did not mention in the presentation is you also have to look at the methods that the author has used. So was an experiment the best way to come to that understanding? Was a survey the only way? Should they have followed up with a focus group to get deeper insight and so on? So you can also sort of read an article to see the relevance and the appropriateness of the methods that were used for the empirical work and so on, if it's not just a position paper. Anyone else? Elliot, you still have your hand up. Do you wish to say some more? Please go ahead.
And I've lowered my hand.
You lowered your hand. Okay, you're welcome. Anyone else? Enos, Joyce, Hesti, Monani. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the names correctly. Please forgive me. Lufunda, how are you? I haven't spoken to you for a long time.
Sorry, Prof. I was busy multitasking.
Oh,
yeah, I've just welcomed my baby. So yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I just turned on the internet and listening. So I missed some of it.
No
but sorry,
problem.
I hope I'll catch up on the internet. Yeah. I mean on the website.
No comment, nothing. Anyone else? I think we've got about 4 minutes left if anybody else wants to just add something. What I will do, I will send to Colleen. I think it's a grid that I worked out. So it's like a little block, one pager. And I've just divided into columns, you know, it captures the author, title. Oh, and I just remind me, I need to say something about the years of the publication in terms of evidence. Then I'll just put down in the block the main methodology, the methods, what constituted the sample, what were the key findings, who are the key authors that the argument is built on, and so on. And I have these little sheets of paper that I just file up, and then I can organize them in different ways when I want to write and so on. So just keep that in mind. Coming to evidence, when you look at the evidence and they're using references now, what others have written, are they using references from 19 Futsek in order to justify what is happening in 2023? So students will write something like, school conditions are really poor and under-resourced, and then I'll see a year like 1987. And I'm wondering why the student is not reading something far more current in the last 4 or 5 years. So look at who the author cites and from which years. The other evidence that you can look at is, does the author only rely on evidence based on, say, Western knowledge or Eastern knowledge or Southern knowledge? So is they spread wide? Because if they are only focusing on one part of the world, how can they come to a generalization that affects everyone in the world? So that's another way of looking at the evidence if you wish to critique it.
Hello, it's Unanne.
Hello, go ahead, please.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, the appears as if the writing style is now, okay, let me say, going to like it's changing, it's evolutionary, or there's a paradigm shift. And when I look on some of the materials that has been written by some other authors, I find that it appears as if it devaluates or it weakens the language and the content, and then the knowledge that should be got by the reader. You find that it's no longer the appropriate knowledge because of the language that they use, the writing style that they use has moved from the ancient writing style. Don't know whether my perception is wrong.
No, you are absolutely right. So for example, when you're now reading stuff or people that are writing on, say, feminism and so on. Now, feminists have created new words. They don't want to spell woman with M-A-N. That means they don't want to have the word man in it, or women, M-E-N at the end. So the new way of writing woman is W-O-M-X-N. So the A is replaced with an X for a singular. If you're writing about one woman, W-O-M-X-N. When it's many women, then it's W-O-M-Y-N. That's the new spelling. Because when you use that discourse, it's a reminder to the person who's reading it that doesn't matter that I'm a male. I'm a feminist. I support women's independence, liberation, and they move away from the domination of patriarchy and so on. So it brings in a whole new dimension. So you are actually very correct. There's also different argument styles. So, there's the Western style, there's the Eastern style, there's the traditional, and then there's the indigenous storytelling style. So, for example, in North America, the American Indians, and they prefer to be called American Indians because they say it's a constant reminder to the white man that they made a mistake. They thought they were in India and they found the Indians, but meantime they were in America. So they like that it's a reminder to them that they made this mistake. And they, just like in Africa, they have a tradition, or the oral tradition and the narrative tradition. So we share our knowledge through singing and through stories. And that is becoming more and more an acceptable form of writing in academia. So there are moves also in terms of how arguments are being developed and so on. But I would say, before you go there, first master the norm, the way we write now. And once you've established yourself and got a name, then you start experimenting. And then people are more likely to respect you because they know you know what you're a researcher, you know how to do research and so on. But now you're also becoming an innovative researcher. So I would say don't jump too quickly to that. Establish yourself, and then you can then do all the experimental things. But we're entering a very exciting space in which different ways of knowing, different ways of doing, and different ways of communicating are taking the world by storm. Are there any other comments from anybody, anyone, anywhere?
Yes, Prof.
Yes, Lafunda, please go ahead.
Yes, yes, Prof. It's nice to see you after so long. It's actually been a while. Yes, you made a very critical point right at the end. I think with regards to your writing style, the first thing that you mentioned, which is absolutely important, essential, is that you need to know who you're writing to, what you're writing, and for what. I think it's very important you go through, you know your space, you go through what's the norm before you start adding anything new. I recently had, not recently, I think about 2 years ago, I was stunned by one of the journals. Well, that paper has since been published, but I wrote a manuscript and submitted for publication. I learned a few things from the feedback. So before before the paper even went for review, they asked me who one of the authors was and what sort of work they had done. And I had to dig out their work and submit. And I don't know if they wanted me to prove that he's done some work before, but I've noticed something that I think it's very important to have also a track record. Some of these people, when you start something new and they don't know you, they'll really rebut you and you get a shambok. But when they've seen you somewhere and they've seen you do some work and gradually develop your work, they become a little bit softer. So it's very important what you told us, that you have to start from somewhere before you reach somewhere.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, because in fact, recently, you probably know Laura Campbell. She was an academic leader for, was it teaching and
Yes,
learning or research?
Yeah,
right?
yes, I do.
So she was my PhD student. And so we've recently written a paper on our relationship and the battles we had during that relationship. It was quite a tough one because we misunderstood each other, and so on. And we've written it like a dialogue. It's something I've never done before, but it just kind of lent itself to it. And it's for a book that's being published in the West Indies. And when we sent in the abstract, we even wrote the abstract in the form of a dialogue, and it was accepted immediately. But also because now we had both of us have mastered the art of academic writing, and so we're making sure that aspects of academic writing are still there. It's not just she's talking and I'm talking. There's references, there's theory, there's concepts, there's all of that. But we've learned to manipulate it into a much more dialogical style of writing. I must tell you, I struggled a bit, and so did Laura. We both struggled a bit because, you know, to get that where we really are on the same point and not, you know, moving ahead of the of each other was the hard part to manage and so on. But we've done it. So yeah, so I think first you know, they're saying if you want to resist something, you need to know what you're resisting. So, and it's Arundhati Roy that told us that you know, you must use the master's tools against the master. Then you're very, very powerful. So you can go and write your paper in isiZulu. I can write mine in Gujarati, if we thinking of our own languages, or in Afrikaans or whatever. The people who we want must know this. They don't know our languages, so they're not going to read it. They're never going to be educated. We're going to be educated, those that know the things. But if you can write those same things in the dominant language of academia, you get a much wider readership. So it's also about playing a political game. But you can, and you can do it in two ways. You can publish the paper in your local language as well as in English, as long as you declare that this version is a translation from an original article that appeared in the isiZulu Times of South Africa or whatever it is. Because I've seen a lot of European writers doing it. They've got the article in French and then they've got it in English as well. So maybe we're cutting ourselves short by not expanding our readership outwards. Yeah, so you can see that reading leads to writing, and writing kind of harkens back to reading. So there's this relationship between reading and writing in the kind of work that we are doing, knowledge production. They can't be separated. And often when you're writing, when you read and you go and write, you're not writing about the things you read. The writing takes on a life of its own, and then you got to go back and reread. So it becomes very, very interesting. And I can tell you that I hated writing. Now I enjoy writing, but I still find it a tough thing to tackle. I cry all the time when I have to start, but once I get going, I'm okay. So when you're writing, also start anyway. Be you comfortable, you know, just start with the methodology. That's sometimes the easiest to start with. Then write the findings and then go back and do the other parts. Luther, please go ahead.
So I have a bonus question since I've seen that we ran out of time.
No, it's
so I
fine.
found this conversation is very interesting. So one of the things that I've been trying to explore, but I didn't get far with it. It was because I'm currently doing my PhD, and it seems like I'm likely to get to publish a bit more than I had anticipated. So obviously this is stimulated by the articles that I come across, the recommendations and. But then my specific question is around when you are, I know some students or some PhD candidates, they plan to publish the PhD protocol itself. But what I wanted to find out is whether when it comes to your PhD journal, what can you do with the information, the reflection? So, you know, like on a daily basis, you'd be recording the stuff that you are doing and the learnings and stuff. So the journey, basically, is there something that one can do creatively with the
can.
reflection.
You can. So maybe you need to go outside the medical journals.
Mhm.
For example, there's qualitative inquiry. Now,
Hmm.
qualitative inquiry is a journal that looks at the qualitative aspects of studies.
Mhm.
So you've kept a journal, you made notes and your reflections throughout,
Mhm. Mhm.
which you have not perhaps admitted into your PhD. Am I correct? That was
Maybe just rephrase the question, which
no,
I
I
have not.
said you've not admitted that as evidence in your study.
No,
Right? Those are your, but now that becomes something that you can publish. So it might be the way you want. What argument do you want to make? Do you want to talk about reflection in action, or reflection as you studying? So you want to talk about your PhD journey through your reflective journal.
So, it's like the last one, I think so, because I think
What's yours? Yeah.
yes, because I'm coming across a lot of fascinating, well, maybe they're fascinating to me, but
If
I
you
feel like
want
I
to,
need
you
to
can have a one-on-one session with me, and we
Okay.
can look at it and see what angle you can take and then
Okay.
publish in one of these journals, because
All
these
right.
are so accredited, highly respectable journals that are often Q1 or Q2 journals that you can also get your work. And there's also journals for
Mhm.
for PhD students and so on. There's another, I think it's called Polytechnic or something like that. It's a Turkish one.
Okay.
They get students just to write. It's not proper articles, but you know, all the things that matter to you as a student and so on. So there's
Yes,
many
yes.
of these alternative ways in which you can establish. So a lot of the nursing people are publishing in all these alternative journals, because the nursing discipline are making tremendous strides qualitatively. In fact, I
Sure.
use their qualitative understanding to teach in education. They have such a
That's
powerful
interesting.
understanding of qualitative research.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think we've limited ourselves too much to the normative traditions, and we need to break
True.
through that. Yeah.
No, thanks for that. I appreciate it.
No, you're welcome.
All
And the
right.
thing that I haven't really spoken is about the worldviews, but that needs another long session on its own. How that informs a writer and an author in the way they understand the world and how they. So, because I think, as Elliot was saying, the author's intention was not bad. It's just that the author is unknowing, and the author is using evidence from spaces that have not really done their basic work as well. And Elliot, at some stage, write to Oxford Dictionary and tell them about that as well. They must do a correction. Don't be afraid.
Thank you.
We have to use our African voices now and really make it heard.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Naina.
you're welcome. That's wonderful. And I'm so happy you call me Naina. All these idiots calling me professor. I don't know for what. Everyone is a professor, but Naina's me, the individual. Any case, it was so lovely to be back in this space. I haven't had been so busy, haven't had much time with Colleen and so on. And so great to speak to you all. At any stage, if you need any assistance, give a shout. Be there to assist you, especially with qualitative. Don't ask me for the medical part. I'm useless there. Luther, you have your hand up. Yes, go ahead.
I'll stick to my Prof. Nina.
Yeah. Oh, God. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Just one thing that I wanted to add before we break off. The thing you talked about, the age of the literature you cite,
Yeah.
it is very critical. Yeah, and a lot of the supervisors will tell you that they want you to quote something that's been to reference something that's been published within the past 5 years, at the most 10 years. But actually, we need to also be careful to leave out very important landmark papers. We still cite things from the 1980s and from the 1970s because some of those
No.
papers are the most critical.
Yeah. So Rita,
in-
so let me deal with this quickly, right? So we're saying at least 80 to 85% must be in the last 5 to 10 years. You still have a leeway with 10 or 15%, but it's how you're using that 10 or 15%. So for example, in one of my papers, I made an argument. I can't remember the exact date. And I said something like, in 1936, John Dewey observed about how poorly curriculum was interpreted and being taught to students. Almost 100 years later, the problem still persists. So what I'm so my argument is based on the length of time over which we have still not solved this problem. So I'm trying to tell the reader, I know I'm quoting somebody who wrote it 90 years ago. I'm aware of that, but there's a reason. So it's when students try to hide or just add a reference, just to bulk up the references, that it becomes problematic. Okay. So, you know, sometimes you got to show in the 1930s, this was the problem regarding brain surgery. In the 1940s, this was the problem. In 1950s, so you're trying to show a historical trajectory of the changes in how perhaps cardiac surgery was undertaken, or brain understanding, or whatever it is. But you're writing it in a way so we understand the historical relevance of it. So even if you write to say that surgery in the 1960s was very dangerous because the kinds of technology that are available today were not available to doctors at that time, and so on. But since then, we should not now in 2023 have the same excuse just because we are in Africa. We also need modern day technology. So it depends on the argument. So you see, it's how you use it and how you write it that will tell your supervisor that this is acceptable or not. And I'm speaking now as a supervisor. So I help my students to understand. So when they find an old article, which has some really good points, we discuss how we can use it in the present day. Okay? And that becomes a skill in itself. So we don't just reject old knowledge because it's old. It's how we use. Remember, when you're writing, and any author who writes, they are manipulating existing knowledge to make an argument. That means some conclusion that they are reaching. No knowledge is interest-free. No knowledge is value-free. And no knowledge is objective. Everything is manipulated because we're making an argument. And I always say that understanding is a function of language. If you don't have the discourses, the words, the ways to express it, it can't come to life. Which is why we don't understand animals or babies, what they're saying. We have to kind of infer from the way they cry or their body language or something about what is it that they're trying, because they don't have the language to express it. And we as adults, the way you feel, you're not exactly confused. You're not exactly ignorant. You're not exactly stupid. What word will capture that? And you'll see when people saying, so are you confused? You'll say no. Are you upset? You'll say no. Are you depressed? You'll say no. And then suddenly you'll say, I'm feeling something, but I don't know how to express it, because possibly that word does not exist, but it's a feeling that you have. And in linguistic theory, Lacan speaks about it, and he calls it the bar. So there's something in our head which can't come out through our mouth. And he calls that the bar, because we haven't yet created the concepts that we can express in order to communicate it. So I'm hoping at some stage, all of you will pick up more studies on linguistic and language development and all, because that is the tool you are using to communicate. You need to know that tool as well, which is why I was telling Elliot, the way language develops and moves, it's dynamic. It's not static. And so we're having all of those. Just think about the new words that are coming out. Like stan. Do you know what STAN is? Stan is, if I can explain it to the best of my ability, is a person who is your fan, but is obsessive about you. And so it's used, so all of these things are coming up every day. Think about this. We always had used cars and new cars. Some bright spark salesman thought about it and says, we offer used cars. They used, but they're very new. They're trying to play with the reality in your head. So you, in your mind, you think a used car is superior to a used car, but actually they're both used cars. And a used car is not a new car at all. But they created this new category to confuse you so that it's become a salesman's tactic to get you to buy. Or at least about 10 years ago, in the banks created a new term when they looked at the South African population and said, who is banking and who's not? Those that are not banking or using a bank, they call them the unbanked. So now they went on a drive to find the unbanked. And that explains the rise of Capitec, for example, that has really cornered the market for the poorer populations, because they do offer competitive interest rates, competitively lower charges, and many more benefits and so on. So you have to see how all of that plays out in daily life and ask yourself, what are the new concepts that are coming out in the field that you are working in? And what new concepts will you offer the field? So when I got my full professorship 2 years ago, I think it was offered on the basis that I offered an alternative category of description to decolonization. And I called mine curriculum without borders. So people were talking about decolonizing the curriculum. I was talking about curriculum without borders, which allows for decolonization without throwing away the past knowledge. So if you want to make it to professorship, those are the things you have to do. You have to create new categories, new theories, new concepts, and so on. So think about the enjoyment and the joy of being able to do that. All right, people, I think it's going to almost 5 o'clock. And time to end our session's been quite a long one. And thank you for being such good listeners and what you call it, Okay, Bestie, thank you for the heart.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye-bye, Prof.
Bye, bye.